From the highs of world title reigns to the lows of getting banned from the industry, these are famous WWE wrestlers who ruined their own careers. Starting with one of the most popular wrestlers of the 2000s, Jeff Hardy. From the Attitude Era ladder match wars alongside his brother Matt to becoming a three-time world champion in the late 2000s, Jeff Hardy's high-flying style made him one of the most beloved wrestlers in WWE history. His feuds with Edge, CM Punk, and Umaga, along with his Fairy Tale Championship win at Armageddon 2008, cemented him as a top star heading into the next decade. However, behind the scenes, Hardy was fighting demons the company couldn't script away. He violated WWE's wellness policy in 2007, earning a 30-day suspension, then violated it again in 2008 for a 60-day suspension that caused him to miss WrestleMania 24 entirely. According to reports at that time, Jeff was supposed to not only win the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania 24, but also cash it in on the same night and walk out champion. However, even after all this, Hardy kept clawing his way back to the top, but the pattern underneath never stopped repeating. He left the company in 2009 after a loser leaves WWE match with CM Punk, and shortly after his contract expired, his home was raided and he was arrested. From there, it became a never-ending cycle. Drunk driving, public intoxication charges, arrests that followed him for over a decade, interrupted by stretches where he'd clean up, return, and remind everyone why he was special in the first place. WWE brought him back multiple times over the years, always willing to bet on the charismatic enigma one more time. The breaking point finally came in December 2021 when Hardy walked out on a live event during a tag match while still under contract, causing WWE to release him within a week. He signed with AEW shortly after, but the cycle kept repeating. In June 2022, Hardy was pulled over in Florida, swerving across lanes, and arrested for his third DUI in 10 years. He avoided prison time but lost his driver's license for a full decade and was ordered into a treatment program, with AEW suspending him without pay until he completed it. As of 2026, Hardy is still wrestling in TNA, still capable of flashes of the old magic, but as a lifelong fan of this man, you simply can't help but wonder how different his career would turn out if he didn't keep sabotaging it every single time. However, while Hardy got a taste of the main event scene before his downfall, this next wrestler ruined his career just before his big singles push. When Matt Riddle signed with WWE in 2018, the former UFC fighter made major headlines. He was athletic, charismatic, technically gifted, and his laid-back persona instantly connected with the fans. He tore through NXT, captured Tag Team Gold, and by 2021 he'd formed RK Bro with Randy Orton as one of the hottest tag teams on the main roster. The chemistry was instant and the reactions were massive. Riddle even challenged Universal Champion Roman Reigns during this time and was also involved in a high-profile feud with Seth Rollins. WWE was clearly building him into a legit top guy, with some insiders suggesting Royal Rumble and Money in the Bank wins were being discussed for him down the line. But Riddle's real-life troubles kept colliding with his in-ring career. An allegation dating back to 2018 resurfaced publicly in 2020, leading to a lawsuit that was eventually dropped in 2021. But the damage to his reputation and standing in the company was done. Then came the drug violations. He failed a wellness policy test in mid-2022. Then he was sent to rehab in December 2022 after failing a second test, missing the first quarter of 2023 entirely. He returned to WWE television that April, and for a few months it looked like a redemption arc unfolding in real time. But then in September 2023, Riddle was detained at JFK Airport after accusing a police officer of assaulting him during a confrontation. He later admitted that the incident happened while he was heavily intoxicated and had been denied boarding. He apologized publicly for his conduct, but the timing could not have been worse. He was immediately pulled from that week's television, and just days later, in the middle of WWE's mass talent cuts following the company's merger under TKO, Riddle was released. Since then, he's bounced between MLW, New Japan, and various independent shows, still talented, but he remains permanently locked out of the run at the top of the card that once seemed inevitable. However, if you thought Riddle's downfall was bad, wait till you see what happened to Alberto Del Rio. Alberto Del Rio arrived in WWE in 2010 with a limousine, a personal ring announcer, and a massive push right out of the gate. He won the 2011 Royal Rumble, captured multiple world championships, and was positioned by Vince McMahon as the next big Hispanic superstar the company had been chasing since the death of Eddie Guerrero. For a stretch, it looked like WWE had found its next long-term main event star. But his first run with the company ended in 2014 under ugly circumstances. According to Del Rio's own account, a social media employee made a hurtful, personal comment toward him backstage, and Del Rio responded by slapping him in front of witnesses. WWE fired him immediately, but brought him back in 2015. However, this second chance fell apart almost as fast as it came. His act felt stale, his real-life relationship with fellow wrestler Paige became a constant source of backstage drama, and his attitude made it obvious to everyone around him that he didn't want to be there anymore. He failed a wellness test, began no-showing events without explanation, and was gone from the company again within a year, this time for good. Even after his second release, Del Rio kept making things worse for himself. He spent years publicly trashing WWE in shoot interviews, burned bridges with other promotions like Impact Wrestling, and piled up serious legal troubles that got him virtually blacklisted from every major company. Today, Del Rio occasionally surfaces on wrestling shows in Mexico, but the World Championship resume that should have guaranteed him a Hall of Fame induction is instead remembered as a cautionary tale about how quickly temper and unprofessionalism can ruin a career. But switching gears from this modern era, up next, let's rewind to a popular wrestler from the 2000s who fumbled the biggest push of his career. In June 2006, Rob Van Dam was at the absolute peak of his career. At ECW One Night Stand, RVD defeated John Cena to win the WWE Championship to a massive ovation. 2 nights later, Paul Heyman presented him with the newly reinstated ECW World Heavyweight Championship as well. For the first time in his career, RVD held 2 world titles simultaneously, and WWE was building the entire main event scene around him as a double champion. But then, less than 3 weeks later, it all evaporated in an instant. While driving from a show in West Virginia to Philadelphia with his longtime friend Sabu, RVD was pulled over for speeding. What started as a routine traffic stop turned serious the moment the officer smelled marijuana and searched the vehicle, finding 18 grams of weed in Van Dam's possession. He was arrested on the spot, and Sabu was separately charged. Within days, RVD was ordered to drop the WWE Championship to Edge in a triple threat match also involving Cena, and the very next night he dropped the ECW Championship to Big Show. He was suspended for 30 days on top of losing both belts. After this, RVD never got back to the main event scene in the WWE, but had a brief run in TNA as their world champion. He continued working the midcard for years afterward during short WWE returns. But here was a former double world champion reduced to opening matches and comedy segments, all because of one poorly timed car ride. However, RVD wasn't the only wrestler from this era who fumbled his big push. Mr. Kennedy arrived in WWE in 2005 with natural charisma, an elaborate self-introduction gimmick, and enough in-ring ability for Vince McMahon to put him in matches against stars like Batista and The Undertaker. By 2007, he'd won the United States Championship and captured the Money in the Bank briefcase at WrestleMania 23, positioning him as a future world champion. However, just days after winning the briefcase, a false injury scare forced Kennedy to lose the contract to Edge. It looked like Kennedy had just fumbled the biggest push of his career, but then came another golden opportunity. WWE was building toward revealing that Vince McMahon had a secret illegitimate son on the roster, and all signs pointed to Kennedy. But weeks before the reveal was scheduled to air, Kennedy was named among a dozen WWE talents suspended for violating the company's wellness policy. The storyline was pulled out from under him instantly and handed to Hornswoggle for a comedic payoff instead, turning what should have been the defining push of his career into an afterthought. Kennedy tried to rebuild from there, and WWE did give him more chances, drafting him to SmackDown in 2008 and continuing to push him as a mid-card threat. But injuries kept derailing momentum, and backstage relationships fractured along the way, including tension with both John Cena and Triple H over how Kennedy carried himself. Then, in May 2009, everything ended in an instant. Returning to the ring after 10 months out with a shoulder injury, Kennedy was set to execute a belly-to-back suplex on Randy Orton during a 10-man tag match. The move went wrong, and Orton allegedly landed on his neck. Orton was furious, he complained to Vince backstage, and made it clear he wouldn't work with him again. 4 days later, WWE released Mr. Kennedy from his contract. After his release, he went on to find some success in TNA as Mr. Anderson, but the door back to WWE never reopened. He should have been one of the biggest stars of the Ruthless Aggression era, but one bad night with Randy Orton cost him his job entirely. For years, wrestling fans have debated whether Kennedy actually botched the move or if Orton just wanted him gone from the company. Let me know in the comments what you think. But moving on from Kennedy's tragedy, let's talk about a motormouth who burned every bridge possible. When Enzo Amore debuted alongside Big Cass in NXT, most fans expected him to be nothing more than a sidekick to the towering giant. But Enzo's rapid-fire promos and his signature catchphrases made him an instant hit with crowds, and the duo became one of the most entertaining acts on Raw. When the tag team split, Enzo carved out a solid singles run on his own in the Cruiserweight division, eventually capturing the Cruiserweight Championship and becoming the face of the brand. On the surface, his rise was meteoric, but behind the scenes, there were persistent whispers of friction almost from the start. Reports circulated that veterans found him difficult to work with, that he'd allegedly been removed from the WWE tour bus by Roman Reigns at one point, and that his brash and cocky reputation had made him a nuisance in the locker room. Then, in January 2018, a woman publicly accused Enzo online of misconduct, and the Phoenix Police Department confirmed to reporters that an investigation was open. WWE suspended him within hours of the story breaking, pulling him from that week's television taping and rewriting the show on the spot. The very next day, WWE released him outright, forcing the Cruiserweight title to be vacated. The Phoenix Police Department would go on to close its investigation in May 2018, citing insufficient evidence, and Enzo has consistently denied any wrongdoing. But by the time that news came out, the damage was already done. Since his release, Enzo's career has been a mess of failed runs. A rap career under the name Real One that never found traction, some bookings on the independent circuit and in promotions like Ring of Honor and New Japan, a public physical altercation with fellow wrestler Joey Janela at a concert, and even sneaking into Survivor Series in disguise just months after being fired, only to be escorted out by security. As of 2026, there have been whispers about a return to the WWE, but we'll have to wait and see if those rumors materialize into something real. If you asked anyone in the mid-1990s who the single most influential woman in professional wrestling was, the answer would have been without a doubt, Sunny. During her time in the WWF from 1994 to 1996, Sunny wasn't just a manager or a valet. She was a genuine cultural phenomenon and the most downloaded person on the entire internet in 1996. In 2011, after years of candidly discussing her own struggles with substance abuse and appearing to have turned a corner, WWE inducted her into the Hall of Fame. It felt at the time like a genuinely earned redemption story, and fans were happy to see her honored for everything she'd contributed to the business. However, that celebration didn't last long. Starting in 2012, Sunny was arrested repeatedly on a range of charges: drunk driving, violations of protective orders, and, in 2018, an 8-month jail sentence in Pennsylvania stemming from yet another drunk driving incident. Each time it looked like she'd hit rock bottom, she somehow found a way to go lower, and WWE quietly began distancing itself from her. Then, on March 25, 2022, Sunny's story reached its horrific conclusion. Driving in Ormond Beach, Florida, with a blood alcohol level measured at more than 4 times the legal limit, Sunny rear-ended a vehicle stopped at a red light, setting off a chain reaction collision that killed 75-year-old Julian Lassiter, who was pronounced dead at the scene. She'd been given chance after chance by courts in multiple states for a decade, but this time there were no more chances left to give. In August 2023, she pleaded no contest, and that November, she was sentenced to 17.5 years in prison, followed by 8 years of probation. Her Hall of Fame induction technically still exists in the company's record books, but it's a certainty WWE will never publicly celebrate it again. However, while Sunny's downfall played out across a decade, let's talk about a promising star whose entire career evaporated overnight. Patrick Clark first appeared on WWE Tough Enough in 2015, and while he didn't win the show, WWE liked what it saw enough to sign him to a developmental deal. He initially wrestled under a fairly generic presentation, but in 2017, everything changed when he transformed into the Velveteen Dream, a flamboyant, theatrical character unlike anything else on the roster at the time. Dream had the look, the mic skills, the mind games, and the in-ring ability to back it all up against the best NXT had to offer. Industry insiders openly projected him as a future WrestleMania main eventer once he reached the main roster, with some believing he had the single highest ceiling of anyone in NXT. But then, in April 2020, everything fell apart almost overnight. Public allegations surfaced during the Speaking Out movement that Clark had sent inappropriate messages and images online. He was quietly pulled from television, his push evaporated, and he was barely used for the remainder of his contract. In May 2021, WWE released him, and his troubles kept compounding from there. He was arrested multiple times in the years that followed on charges including cocaine possession, misdemeanor, and trespassing. As of 2026, he occasionally performs on tiny independent shows most fans have never heard of, still hoping for a comeback that WWE has shown no willingness to grant. But while the Velveteen Dream might never return to the company again, check out this video next about the best versus worst returns in WWE history.